Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner. A couple of weeks ago, myself and Titan Comics' two premier editors, Jake Devine and Phoebe Hedges, held a panel at MCM Comic Con London about the business of editing comics, what those roles involve, and how they interact with the creators of comic books. It's interesting stuff, particularly if you're interested in a career in the comic book industry or indeed a career in comic book editing. And here are Phoebe and Jake to tell you all about it. Enjoy.
My name's Andrew Sumner. I am the Executive Vice President of Titan Comics. If you ever go to Forbidden Planet on YouTube, I'm the presenter of Forbidden Planet TV, so check us out there. And if you ever go to Forbidden Planet, like Catwoman just says she did, yeah, you'll find us all there as well. So this is the mighty editorial team from Titan Comics. On the far corner, we have editor Phoebe Hedges. Give her a round of applause. And to my immediate left, we've got group editor Jake Devine.
Hello.
Give him a round of applause. Now, you might have guessed what the content of this panel is from the title, Editing Comics the Titan Way, or something like that. That's exactly what it's about. We thought we'd give you guys a preview of our creative process at Titan Comics and what it's like to actually work with comics editors and what they're looking for and what it's like to submit work to comics editors. So before we talk about any of that, guys, what has been your path to doing the jobs that you have now? And we'll start with you, Jake. You're our group editor. How did you end up becoming a group editor at Titan Comics?
Well, it's quite a while ago now, so this is back in 2014. I was actually applying for a job in Forbidden Planet, and they didn't have anything going at the time, but they said, hey, we've got this internship if you're interested. I didn't really know what it was. I thought it was going to be more store-based, so I thought, but I was looking for work, so I was like, yeah, sure, go for it. Ended up turning up at Titan HQ and being in a room surrounded by comics and being like, wow, like I've found my place. And luckily I got the internship, and it was a really good experience, really eye-opening. Like, I didn't realize there was such a thing, as a comic book editor. I'd read comics, didn't realize there was editors behind all the magic. So yeah, it was a really good experience, and I found like this was my passion, this is what I wanted to do. After that was like a 3-month period, and I sort of kept in touch with the guys, and when a job opening actually came up, I applied, and I started out as an editorial assistant, and sort of have made my way up since then. So I've gone through like so many different titles, I can't think now. Editorial assistant, assistant editor, editor, yeah, now I'm group editor. Yeah, a bunch of different titles. And really I've just gained all my experience and my skills and all that, just working my way up and doing more and more editorial work.
So Jake, tell the good people what books you actually edit. So Jake's our group editor. He has an overall view of the entire editorial team. But what books do you work on directly?
So at the moment, I oversee Doctor Who, Cowboy Bebop, Horizon Zero Dawn, hard case crime titles, which hard case crime title speaks for itself, and a bunch of other stuff, yeah.
And there's a lot of things that you're working on at the moment that's super cool that you can't talk about, right? I don't want you to talk about it, but you are working on it, right?
I'm always working on something super cool that I can't talk about, but I think I've got enough super cool stuff out at the moment that we can talk about. It'll be enough to excite you all.
Brilliant. And Sophie, what was your route to becoming editor at Titan Comics?
So I had a bit of quite a streamlined process. I was at university studying creative writing, and obviously at the end of my 3 years, I needed a job. So I had just seen Captain Marvel in cinemas, and then I came home and I saw a job posting for an assistant editor at Titan. And I did think I was applying for Titan Books when I first applied. Realized on the train to the interview, oh no, wait, Titan does comics. Which then I was really excited about because I was really into comics as a teenager. I was a big Batman fan, and like the Arkham City games were my foundation. So I applied to be an editorial assistant at Titan Comics. Got the job in a very wild weekend. I had the interview on a Thursday, got the call back Friday, another interview Monday. In the space of a week, I was suddenly employed, and it was amazing. And since then, yeah, I've worked my way up through the company. So I was an editorial assistant, and then I was an assistant editor, and now I'm a full-blown editor, which is very exciting.
It's tremendously exciting. And Phoebe, what books that you can tell me about or tell the good people about do you actually work on?
So my first series I ever worked on, and just wrapped up with volume 6, is Life is Strange. I also oversee the Sea of Thieves digital comics and the Battletoads comics. And then, yeah, a lot of stuff that is coming out this year and going to be announced soon, but, you know, mum's the word.
Phoebe's been doing some epic work for us on the Life is Strange comics, and we worked with a brilliant writer on Life is Strange, Emma Viacelli, and Phoebe and I will be doing a panel here with Emma at 5 o'clock today, which is all about Life is Strange. So, guys, before we get into the existential fabric of what makes a great editor, yeah, can you fill people in on, let's talk about the process of editing comics, because I've been a journalist and an editor for 30 years and a presenter and all that kind of stuff, but one thing I've never actually done is edit comic books, and it is quite a complex process because you're not just dealing with an author, you're dealing with a variety of creators, whether it be authors, artists, letterers, colorists. But what is that process like, guys? Could you fill us in?
So I start? So
Yeah, go for
something
it.
we always say is our whole job as editors is really just like a project manager. You know, especially when people who don't really know comics and you say, hey, I'm a comic book editor, and they're like, what's that? And then project manager is sort of the way to go. You know, like Andrew says, is you haven't just got like a writer for a book that you're doing. You know, you've got a writer, an artist, you'll have a colorist, maybe the artist split between a penciler and an inker, a letterer. Yeah, lots of different creative people are involved in making a comic. So it's a lot to sort of organize and basically bring everyone together on this one project and make sure everything is, you know, smooth, everyone's on the same page, we all got our creative ideas, but everyone's sort of, particularly with the stuff that we do, it's licensed comics, so we have to make sure that we're in line with the brand that we're presenting. If you have anything to add.
Yeah, so, I mean, on a technical standpoint, comics for us starts when we, you know, partner up with a licensor, you know, and then that's when we assemble the creative team. So starting usually...
Phoebe, could I just interject for a second?
Go for it.
So only because before I started working in licensed comics, I didn't know these terms. They seem quite straightforward, but basically the partner that we work with externally that owns the intellectual property that we're working on, say Blade Runner, for example, our terminology is they're the licensor and we're the licensee. Yeah, so I realize a lot of you will know that, but a lot of people don't know it. I certainly didn't know it until a few years ago. So when we're talking about the licensor, we're talking about the film studio in effect, aren't we?
Yeah, or the gaming company, so to speak. So we chat to them to kind of get an idea of the brand and to see the direction they want to go in, if they have anyone they have like their eye on. And then we begin building the creative team, starting with a writer normally, preferably a writer and artist at the same time. But, you know, it doesn't always work out that way. So, yeah, and then it's, you know, sometimes licensors have an idea of the plot they want, or they want a writer to come up with it. So it changes from book to book, really.
The other thing that you've both touched upon is something that, as an editor myself, I know that a lot of people think we all sit around dealing with words and creativity most of the time. But the reality is, it's a massive project management job, and that is maybe 2/3 to 3/4 of what we actually do, is shepherding materials back and forth. Whether it's a creator shepherding it through the different elements of the creative process, which we'll talk about in a second, or, as you both touched upon, as we mentioned, to the licensor. And if you work in licensed comics, and I would say maybe 80% of what we do is licensed stuff, like Blade Runner, like Doctor Who. So a lot of our time is spent dealing with the movie studio, dealing with the BBC. A lot of your time specifically is spent doing that. And your relationships with the studios or with the BBC is just as close as your relationship with the creators, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, you really get to know, like, who you're working with. Comics are a really, like, collaborative kind of medium, which I absolutely adore. There is no one person's idea behind a comic book series, which is great. And I really consider, like, myself as an editor to be, like, I call it the conduit of creativity, because even if it's not, like, an original idea from you, you've still got such a hand in it, and you've got to take it from A to B. So...
Yeah, it's also really exciting, like you say, because it's so collaborative. You can get an idea from every single person. Like when you get the finished product, there's something from every creator in that, you know. So the writer might have done like written the script a certain way, then the artist would have taken that and like put their own spin on it, added things in, changed things slightly to how that fits their style, which really like makes it unique. And I think that's like always fun to see, because it's always a surprise when you're following the process. You'll never, even though like say for a script you think you know what you're going to get, and then you get something else and it's like, oh wow, this is great.
So guys, let's go through the basic planks of the process. So when you get your script in, you might have already appointed an artist, and somebody who's compatible with the author. But what stages, real quick, do you go through when you get the script in? What happens internally before we then push it out to the artist?
So you give it a read through, obviously. You read it through. I'm very lucky. A lot of the writers and everything that I work with are already so talented, so it makes my job quite easy. But checking for typos or sort of plot beats, sometimes if there's too much dialogue in a panel, you know, cut it down or move it around, shuffle it about on the page. Making sure that you have to think quite visually, so you have to be able to picture the artwork before it's drawn, which doesn't always work, because obviously an artist has their own interpretation. But yeah, mostly for me, you know, especially on Life is Strange, Emma has been so wonderful and she knows the brand so well that it was mostly just typos and making sure things were spelled in American English.
Yeah, and that's quite an important thing, isn't it? Because comics are fundamentally an American art form. The branch of comics we work in are really an American art form, and we work to an American format. We essentially produce them for American English, not for English, right?
Yeah, except for Rivers of London, which the editorial pages, so the staff list is all in American, but then because it's so quintessentially British, it's all, you know, there are U's in every word where they need to be.
Yeah, no, and that's the amazing Rivers of London series written by Ben Aronovich, which is an amazing series of novels, but we produce the comics and the graphic novels with Ben, don't we?
Yeah. So he oversees them. We've got a new series, which is spearheaded by Celeste Bronfman. I think it's called Deadly Ever After.
It is called Deadly Ever After. And if you want to check this book out, there'll actually be an interview on Forbidden Planet TV on YouTube that goes up tonight with Ben and with Andrew Cartmel, who's his co-author, and with Celeste. So the three of them, we've got an interview about that specific book that goes live this evening on Forbidden Planet TV.
Awesome. And if you've not read the graphic novels before, you can just pop into the Forbidden Planet store just over there. They've got them on sale, so if you're excited to read them, I would go and get some.
A lot of things that we're talking about are available at Forbidden Planet, to which literally if you walk straight down here is like 3 minutes on your right. You can't miss it. So most of the things we'll talk about are available there. Jake?
I was just going to say, I think I can see it from here. So.
Yeah, brilliant. You're taller than me. I'm a bit too short for that. So that's the script end of the process. Now, what happens with regard to getting that over to the artist, and what happens in terms of the phasing of the art as we get it in? You know, because some people think that you get 32 pages of art in one go, which is rarely what happens. So take us through that, guys.
I mean, like we said before, it's so collaborative. We have many people like working not just on the script, but on the art as well. So it may be one artist doing the pencils and inks. You may have someone just doing the pencils or just doing the inks. And it's all just a progress of trying to get that in sort of as fast as you can. A lot of what we do is very much deadline based. You know, we've got to stick to our schedules so that we can get stuff released and so that people can actually read it. So once the artist has the script, their job will then be to send in what we call layouts or roughs or sketches of how they're going to plan out each page. And we look through those and we pretty much check it at every stage just to make sure it's still on script, or if they've sort of tweaked it a bit, we think if that works, what doesn't work, what would we suggest. Maybe sometimes the writer's a bit more involved at this stage as well. What they suggest, does this match what they're thinking? And once that's all good, then we would move on to the full pencil stage. All the pages will be laid out, the artwork perfectly as in the pencils, and then the same thing would be done, check it all through, make sure we're all happy, do it all inking, same thing again, and then we get someone to color it. Very rarely you have the same artist and colorist, but it depends what the style of the book is, what the art, what the brand is. So we get someone to color it, and then finally we'd get someone to do the lettering, which includes all the balloons and the sound effects of the dialogue and all of that. So in a perfect world, that all goes smoothly. Sometimes you have to sort of mesh everything together. So sometimes pencils or inks are still going on while some pages are being colored, other pages are being lettered, and then finally at the end it all gets brought together. That's essentially the process of making a comic strip. With us as well, there's sort of the extra step, because we do a lot of licensed comics. A lot of things have to be approved by the licensors to make sure that we're sticking on brand. Like if there's anything that we're not allowed to say or draw as part of, you know, what doesn't stick with that brand or a certain character, to make sure we're as accurate as possible. Depending on the licensor as well, some of them are quite involved, some of them are not really that fussed. So some licensors might look in at every single stage, so they'll want to check all the pencils, all the inks, all the colors, etc. And some might just want to see the finished product and be like, yep, great, doing a good job.
So what's interesting about that is that that's indeed the process, but the reality is how long that takes for one issue of a comic can vary wildly, right? So with a fair wind, with everything coming together as it should, in the optimal situations, how long do you think from sending the script to the artist to having the complete comic book for one issue would it take?
Well, we typically try to aim for about like 6 weeks for the black and white artwork, as we call it, the pencils and inks, and then an extra sort of 2 or 3 weeks for colors, because coloring and lettering can kind of happen at the same time, thanks to sort of just being laid out on the page. So ideally, you know, it's a 9-week process per book, not including script time.
And that's per issue, isn't it, Phoebe?
Yeah.
And also, I think things work a lot quicker as well for us these days, because we're all like online. A lot of people do digital art now as well, so it's a lot easier to get those stuff being done concurrently, so you're not waiting for, like, sort of back in the day, maybe you had a studio of people doing the art and the coloring all together, but if not, then, you know, you'd have to get pages sent to different people at different times, whereas now everything is, you know, everything's instant, so, you know, that really helps a lot, get things moving quickly.
I remember there have been stories about how Titan was sort of making comics pre-internet, and so they'd talk about having to fax pages over to other licensors, which, considering some of our licensors are based in the States, I mean, I can't imagine that. I've been raised with the internet, thankfully.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started working in comics, not only was that the case, but when I first started, it's like you didn't even have any faxes, you know, so you were putting the original artwork in pouches and sending them to the USA, secure pouches on planes, and then they were getting sent back. And then the lettering used to be done by hand and overlaid onto the actual physical artwork itself. I mean, nowadays, about 20 years ago, a good friend of mine, a guy called Richard Starkings, developed digital lettering. And he's the guy who runs a big company called Comic Craft. He do loads of work with us, and with Marvel, and with everybody else. But as you say, Jake, it's all instant now, which is brilliant in terms of output and creativity. And just to be honest, not naming names or books, if it all goes horribly wrong, which of course, human life, it always goes horribly wrong. You've only got to look at Western society to tell you, to clue you up to the fact that can happen. If it all goes horribly wrong, how long can one book take to get out?
I mean, sometimes you're working on a project for over a year. I mean, it depends at what point you struggle, because particularly when you're starting a project, you know, you're not just, you know, going from one issue to the next. You know, you've got to start from the scratch, essentially. So that can sometimes, unless you're really lucky, that sometimes can take, you know, a good few months, you know, before, you know, you've actually got the first issue ready to go and to start being created. So, yeah, so sometimes it could be done really quickly. Sometimes it could take, you know, a year or more.
Yeah. I mean, that's the interesting thing, really, because, again, and it's like I said, without naming names, anything can happen, really. I mean, I've worked on books in the past. I mean, and what I'm talking about here, it's a common challenge for ourselves at Titan, for the guys at Marvel, the guys at DC, the guys at IDW. You can sometimes have those nightmare books that take a long time to put together. I mean, I've had experiences in the past where I've contacted the artist who was running late, who's halfway through the book, and he'd forgotten that he was working on it. Yeah, he just like had no conception of the fact, not only that he'd completed half of the book, but that he'd even started it. Yeah, I mean, this guy had, shall we say, a few substance issues, but, you know, he literally didn't even remember he was working with me. You know, and so that was probably the most extreme example of a situation I can think of that we've all faced.
Yeah, thankfully that's not happened to me yet. Touch wood.
Now we've talked about your process. Something that might interest some of you is if you want to get into the comics business, whether you're a writer, an artist, a letterer, or a would-be colorist, guys, what's the best way that works for you for people presenting their work and you being able to evaluate it?
I mean, I seem to be spending all of my time looking for artists and writers these days. A social media presence is my absolute top tip. You know, an Instagram, or I prefer Twitter. I don't know if other people do, but yeah, a social media presence, a website, just somewhere where I can look through your portfolio. Because I don't always reach out to artists before I know I want to commit to them. So I'd rather have like a menu almost of your work.
And what is your Twitter handle, Phoebe?
I think my Twitter handle is @Phoebe Hedges. I think my profile picture is me as Princess Leia, so...
Well, that's exactly what my profile picture is as well. There we go.
What, me as Princess Leia?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a bit weird, yeah. I was thinking of me as Princess Leia, but yeah, maybe yours is more sensible. Yeah, Jake, what about yourself?
I think I'm not really good at Twitter, so I'd prefer Instagram. And also, ArtStation is quite a good place I like to look. You know,
Say that again, mate.
ArtStation.
Yeah.
Yeah, if people have got a good ArtStation presence, you know, because you can just see all the art, and it's really, really good space just to see a good portfolio. And I think you want to find someone's best work straight away. So I think if you've got a lot of stuff, it's a lot to troll through. And you want to, because we have to look through so many, you know, portfolios, and we're constantly looking at different people. You know, you want to have the best stuff first, I think, because that will really catch our eye and think, okay, yeah, immediately I'm drawn to this person. This is what I'm looking for, and then you don't have to spend ages, because you know we'll move on pretty quickly if we haven't found what we're
I think
looking for.
that's a very good point, because with regard to art samples, particularly art samples, lettering samples, colouring samples, some people apply the ethos of what we're going to do is we're going to lead you through a journey with our visual portfolio, and so we're going to have this glorious climax, which is our best work. That's the opposite of what we in journalism call the pyramid effect, and you have to actually always lead with your best stuff right away, so it's easily the most visible. And guys, isn't it true that what you're also looking for, it's not just quality of work. The next stage when you evaluate someone you work with is output and speed of turnaround.
Yeah, I mean, literally, as I said earlier, like deadlines and schedules are really key, because, you know, at the end of this, as a business, we've got deadlines to hit. We've got to make, you know, our money, and doing that. Part of doing that is getting stuff on sale at the right time. So it's got to be key that these people can work fast and work good in a good amount of time. So you don't want to be constantly, I mean, part of our job is, you know, constantly chasing people. Have you done this yet? Have you done this yet? Have you done this yet? But the less you have to do that, the better. And it will also be beneficial for you as a writer or an artist, because we're going to think, oh, this person was really good. I didn't have to really chase them much. They just did the job they were supposed to do. And, you know, that's going to make us want to work with them again. So for people, if you're thinking about breaking into the industry or trying to get, you know, work, that is a key part, is getting things done on time.
Yeah, I think well said. Have you got anything to add, Phoebe?
Well, I was just going to say, before, you know, we scare you off by saying, you have to be fast, you have to be fast. A lot of what editors do is also just manage expectations. So if you know you can't hit like a deadline, then you just have to be honest about it. Because we obviously want to work with you, and, like, you know, we want to work with our artists, and we want to make the best comic we can. So if you can say, oh, I can't make it in 6 weeks, but I'll make it in 7, then, you know, that's another side of it. Like,
yeah.
It's not just about being fast, especially if you're good.
Yeah, and that is very, very well said. And managing expectations really looks like somebody like Phoebe having a conversation with somebody like me, where I'm going, where is the book? And Phoebe's going, do you want it to be on time, or do you want it to be absolutely brilliant? And, you know, often we factor that in to the actual scheduling in the first place. So you tailor it to your creators, don't you?
Yeah, it's a bit of a give and take, you know, sometimes, depending what the project is. Like, sometimes you have to get things out on time. Like, particularly with our licensed stuff, if there's like a game coming out or a new series on TV starting, we want to, you know, get out with that buzz. So that comic will have to be out at that time.
Now, we've got a couple of minutes left, and before I ask, I've got plenty of questions for you guys, but my thinking is there might be somebody in the audience who's got a question they want to ask. So if you do, please raise your hands and let me know. Selena, Kyle, what have you got for me?
Sorry.
I was wondering, what is the biggest thing you struggled with in your line of work?
For me, I think it's
Answer this carefully, mate.
yeah. I was going to say actually talking about deadlines and stuff. Balancing the different titles is quite difficult when you've got several titles at once, all at different stages, and trying to meet those deadlines can be quite difficult. So you have to be very organized. You have to know exactly where everything is at any one point, and if anything goes wrong, you have to be able to jump in and like try and flip it around at any point. So it's constantly moving. You have to be very on it, and sometimes it can be quite a bit overwhelming, especially when something goes wrong, and it's like, oh my God, because then everything goes on fire. But I think over the years, over my experience, I've gotten better at managing it, that's my job, so I hope I get better.
How about yourself, Phoebe?
I would say, obviously, in an ideal world, with the licenses that we work with, you would know a license inside out before you start working on the comic. Sometimes my biggest struggle is trying to play catch up to sort of what the fans already know. Like, one of my favorite anecdotes is that I had never played Life is Strange before I came on the comic. My first introduction to the series as a whole was the comic. I'm now obsessed. I've, played it all through now. But, yeah, it's making sure that you understand the license, deeply enough that you're going to catch the niche references that a fan will.
Yeah, that is very well said, I think. That's a great question. Thank you, mate. Anybody else got anything? Yes, the gentleman.
I guess the flip side of that question, what's your kind of favorite comic project or that you've worked on at your time at Titan that's just made you think, oh, this job is awesome and I'm really proud of that?
I think for me, there's so many that I love working on. I think one I sort of always go back to is Doctor Who, because that was my first big project that I took on as an editor, and because I was a fan of Doctor Who before, so getting to do that, it was like, oh my God, this is literally like a dream come true. I love comics, I like Doctor Who, and now I get to do them both. And I think I find that a lot with a lot of the titles that we do, because it's such a pop culture world that we work in. So there's always that experience of I get to do what I love. So.
Yeah, I have to say, I think as much as I didn't understand it when I first started it, Life is Strange is still, it was my first big series. The creator team was such a joy to work with. We wrapped up our last issue. It went on sale a couple months ago. Volume 6 is now on sale at Forbidden Planet. But watching like this, series that's now 5 years old, comic-wise, wrap up, I was moved to tears a little bit watching the story come to a close. So.
Yeah, presenting them here over the High Seas T-shirt.
I did make this T-shirt to match the comics.
And you literally made it, didn't you, mate?
I did it last night.
High level of craftability. Yeah. I've got an answer on this one as well, which is, so when I was a student in Liverpool, when I was in my very early 20s, I became a massive fan of the TV show, the classic 60s TV show, The Prisoner, which, if you're familiar with, is just wonderful television, written by and starring Patrick McGowan. What's that, brother? I am not a number. I am a free man. What do you want? Information. Yeah, exactly. Right on. And you may notice that TV show imprinted very heavily on me and forged my dress sense, which has not changed for like 35 years. But one of the things that we did at Titan that was an epic project that I just loved is that the founding father of American comic book art, Jack Kirby, one of the projects he'd done at Marvel, which was never published, was a comic book adaptation of The Prisoner. And he designed it and wrote and illustrated the first 2 issues. And then another comic book legend did the 3rd and 4th issues, Gil Kane. And nobody had seen that work since it was created. It was rumored to exist. And a couple of years ago, we put together an archive edition with all of that artwork and published it for the first time and put it out globally. And as an old-time Marvel fan, as an old-time Jack Kirby fan, as an old-time Prisoner fan, that was something I was very, very proud of. Very proud of indeed. So we've all got decent stories there. Yeah. Guys, I'm just about to wrap up. We've got a few minutes left. And I guess my final question would be, what is it that still brings you guys into the office about or into our virtual office, which is the reality, about what's it like working in the comic book industry, because it was something I always wanted to do, but what's the reality of it for you emotionally?
It is just really exciting. Like, you know, there are hard days because at the end of the day, it's a job. You know, you have to put in the work. But you do have to remind yourself, you know, I'm working in comics. You know, I get to look at comics and make comics, and I can't really say it's a bad job to be in. So.
No, not at all. It's obviously quite a small industry, and it's sort of the little kid version of book publishing, and it's so much more informal, but it's so driven by love. Everybody wants to be making comics. Everybody wants them to be good. So, yeah, it's just driven by love and passion, which is the perfect environment, really.
Yeah, I mean, with a few exceptions, unless you're, you know, Alan Moore or Neil Gaiman, you know, unless you're some of the big US comic creators like Dan Slott. And by the way, now that I've mentioned that, Jake has been working. Dan Slott is the most famous Spider-Man writer of the last 15 years. He created the Spider-Verse. He created Superior Spider-Man. Jake's been working with him on a very special Doctor Who comic that we're launching in October. And we'll have a virtual panel talking to Dan about his work with Jake on that tomorrow here at the show. But whether you're one of those guys, generally speaking, and this includes all three of us, you're never going to make any heavy bread working in the comics industry. No way. But if you want to work with people who love what they do and work in a very loving, professional environment with people who genuinely care about each other and care about the medium they work in, then there's no better place to work. You know, I've been a comics fan since 1966. I own 30,000 comic books, and I'm telling you, working in the comic book industry is a blessing and a privilege. And, you know, I get to work with people like Phoebe and Jake every day who, as you can see, are not only world-class at what they do, but are lovely people. And, you know, you'll only find lovely people in the halls of MCM London Comic Con or any Comic Con you go to in the country. So if you could give me a round of applause for Phoebe and Jake. And if you could also give a round of applause to Lauren Noding, our marketing manager right here, who set this panel up. And if you could also give a round of applause to our cameraman Ian and our sound guy Ed, doing fantastic work throughout the entire weekend. And finally, last but not least, a round of applause for yourselves. Yes.
And for this guy here.
Thank you.
Dave.
And you've got to come and see us at the Forbidden Planet booth. And if you want to check us out online, we are Comics-Titan is our website. You can find us on Facebook. We're Titan-Comics. We're Comics-Titan on Instagram. I think we're Titan Comics on Twitter. We're easy to find there. And if you go to YouTube and look up Forbidden Planet TV, you will see tons of interviews with our creators. Thanks for staying all this time and listening to us talk. And comics is a passion play. And if you have that passion, we'd love to meet you and we'd love to speak to you. And guys, have a great show. It's lovely to meet you all. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.